This is Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, presented by Bearded Iris, here to do SEC Baseball Power Rankings as we do this on the morning of Tuesday, May the 16th. But these are going to be very different power rankings than what you're going to see anywhere else. This is not based on body of work or conference record or standings or anything like that. This is me taking the teams with the rosters they have at this moment, which includes several teams without key players, especially on the pitching side. It would be as if you could take these teams right now and somehow in a parallel universe, every team in the league play every other team in the league 3 times in its park and 3 times in everybody else's park. I know the world doesn't work that way, but you have unbalanced schedules and teams that play very differently at home on the road. So if we could do that and take the teams with what they have now, what would that look like? So please don't yell at me and say, this idiot's got power rankings that nobody else would have. Yeah, I know that. That's not what I'm trying to do. And I think the insight component of it is maybe more valuable than the power rankings. At least that's what I'm trying to do here. So with that, let's get right into it. We'll start at the bottom. And this week, the number 14 team is Ole Miss. Frankly, because Ole Miss, to me, I don't know if it's fair to say is disinterested in playing baseball right now, but it's not going to get into Hoover, which is a major disappointment after winning it all last year. And it just did not play well against Auburn, swept in its own part this weekend. So I think if you could take this Ole Miss team as it is constructed with the way it's playing now and go forward, Ole Miss would be last place in the league. That's exactly where the Rebels are right now. Number 13, I've got Mississippi State, which comes off a tremendous road series win in Baton Rouge. And that tells me something about the Bulldogs. They've still got some fight. They've still got some want to play. They've very much got an uphill battle to get into Hoover, and that's going to take some luck in some places. And I still think over the long haul, State's pitching is really, really problematic. And I don't think I have to explain it other than to say, look at the stat sheet. This is nothing people don't already know if they've been paying attention. So that's why I've got State at 13. The pitching just has been horrendous, and I don't think would be enough to carry State very far in a scenario that I've outlined, but State's not thrown in the towel and quit, and I think that's a big deal. Okay, number 12, I've got Missouri, and I've got Georgia at 11, and I realize again that Missouri swept Georgia this weekend in some close games. That was in Columbia. Georgia plays very well at home and not as well on the road, and that's a factor. Georgia did figure out some pitching towards the end of the year, and the lineup, of course, just hits home runs everywhere. So I would favor Georgia just over Missouri as my 11th team to Missouri at 10. But you could argue the other way. That's why I've argued that way, I think, with Charlie Goldstein and some guys like that who've helped. Georgia did figure out some pitching options late, and I like that lineup better than Missouri's. But I do want to acknowledge Missouri just swept Georgia in Columbia, and so people may take issue with that. I would get the reasons why, but that's why I've got Georgia at 11 and Missouri at 12. Now, this one's going to surprise everybody. You won't see them anywhere near this in anybody else's power rankings. And in fact, you will see this team in the top 10 of most computers and probably hosting right now, not just hosting, but probably a national seed. And that's Vanderbilt at 10. And you're going, why in the world do you have Vanderbilt at 10? Well, let's look at the way the Commodores have played recently. The bats have completely gone in the deep freeze. Vanderbilt is not scoring runs against anybody in the league. Granted, it's had some tough road series lately, but the offense has just gone really, really cold. And I think more importantly than that, Vanderbilt has essentially been without Carter Holton now for a month or more. He's pitched some, but when he's pitched, he's not been well. He was a Team USA guy a year ago. I think he's tried to gut it out in spots where maybe he shouldn't be pitching. He didn't pitch last weekend. Hunter Owen has missed a couple of starts, including the one in Gainesville. And what has happened consequently? Vanderbilt has lost in its last 3 road series. It's won 1 game, and that was at Alabama. It has gotten swept by Tennessee, swept at Florida. The Tennessee and the Florida series were not competitive at all. And again, what were the common denominators in that? Vanderbilt is not hitting, and Vanderbilt did not have Hunter Owen, and it did not have Carter Holton. And you could argue those are 2 of the top 5 starting pitchers in the league. I know we've talked a lot about teams with injury issues, and South Carolina's got some beefs there. Arkansas certainly got some beefs. But I don't know of a team that could withstand injuries to two first-team All-SEC caliber pitchers, which is what's happened to Vanderbilt lately. I don't know if Vandy's going to have those guys going forward or not, but it didn't have them last weekend. And if you put Vanderbilt on the field right now without those two guys, the results have been ugly. That's why I've got Vanderbilt at 10. If Vanderbilt were to get one or both those guys back, they would, I think, rocket up the power rankings. But again, this is based on where they are right now. And where they are right now, I don't like the way that team is constructed. Number 9, I've got Texas A&M. I could have easily put Vanderbilt in front of Texas A&M because A&M's pitching, even with Vandy's injuries, is probably worse than what Vanderbilt's got right now. But what A&M does do is hit the ball a lot better consistently. A&M has kind of done this thing that it did last year where the bats came alive in SEC play. It hasn't quite happened to the degree that it happened a year ago, and the pitching's gotten worse. But that is why I've got A&M at number 9 in the power rankings here. At 8, I've got Kentucky. And I got some qualms about that. I could easily put Kentucky 2, 3, maybe even 4 spots higher. I feel like people have sort of slept on what Kentucky is. Now, my reasons for not having Kentucky higher, I guess, are twofold. One, Kentucky has got pitching depth, but it really doesn't have, in my mind, an ace. And sometimes an ace really does you a lot of good. Now, they can piece it together with Darren Williams, or sometimes Zach Lee has even pitched like an ace lately. But I don't know that they've got that dude on the mound. And offensively, this is the team that will just really wear you down over the weekend. Again, I think Kentucky's underrated. But in this era of college baseball, you kind of need a big home run batter too. And Kentucky doesn't have that. I think Vandy and Kentucky are two teams that I may have shortchanged in the power rankings for different reasons. It's hard to argue having either of them any lower than that for sure. But there's an awful lot of good teams in this league. You guys know that if you're watching this channel. The SEC is insanely good, maybe the best conference in the history of college baseball. Maybe we will be saying that at the end of the year. That's kind of what I think right now. But we'll see, and somebody has to draw the short straw. And Kentucky at 8, I may have been too hard on the Cats there because I do think they have been a team that people have underrated all year. But again, there's other teams that are vying for spots too, and I see some things I really like out of some of the teams ahead that I'm going to get to in a minute. Before we get there, our channel is presented by the Bearded Iris Brewing Company. We are in Nashville. They are in the west part of our town. And if you are in town, see them, go see them, tell them you heard about them on our channel. Bearded Iris is Nashville's home for a beer that is unapologetically itself, memorably composed and fun to drink. They offer a wide variety of hop-focused offerings like IPAs and DIPAs, as well as selected fruit sour stouts and a new hard seltzer. So, and again, thanks to Bearded Iris for sponsoring our channel. Number 7 is South Carolina, or a team that have, at various points of this season, I thought might be the best team in the country. The fielding is kind of my question, but hands on deck. My goodness. The pitching has been really good, and the lineup has been downright scary. Two things with the Gamecocks right now, though. I think the biggest thing is injuries. Will Sanders didn't travel last week, and Noah Hall has not pitched in, man, I don't know, it might be a month now. Eli Jersenbeck has been hurt. Those are 3 really, really key arms. We talked about Vanderbilt's pitching injuries, and oh, by the way, Vanderbilt also, well, that Andrew Dukanich, that's another key guy that they've been missing, who hasn't pitched much this year. But those 3 guys for Carolina, and that's not been all their injuries. They've had some position guys hurt. They're starting to get some of those guys back. But I think right now as constructed, Carolina without those 3 guys, and if they were to come back and pitch up to their capability, Carolina would absolutely jump a few spots and probably even 3 or 4 spots in our countdown. But that's not where Carolina is right now, unfortunately. I'm hoping that the Gamecocks will get some arms healthy, will get its position players healthy, because, man, if these guys get healthy for postseason, especially playing in that park, you don't want any part of them. But right now, I have some questions about Carolina with all those injuries. You were seeing the Gamecocks struggle. Just played a very competitive series at Arkansas, but lost 2 of 3. But anyway, that's why I've got Carolina at 6. or excuse me, at 7. I've got Auburn at 6. And I never in a million years expected to have Auburn here. But this is also a team that's been affected by injury, Joseph Gonzalez. But I think the lineup mostly has stayed healthy from what I remember. Auburn fans, if I'm forgetting an injury, please forgive me. But you're seeing this team really, really hit. The Cole Fosters, the guys of the world that have been in that lineup for what seems like forever are really, really hitting the ball. It seems like every weekend. Auburn, just out of the blue, has started to piece it together with pitching, with Vale and some of those guys. And look, Auburn's had some injuries. Oh gosh, to the Notre Dame transfer, whose name I forget, and some other guys pitching wise that Tommy Sheehan is who I'm thinking about. Should have been a big part of what they have done, but haven't. But Butch Thompson, man, guys, he does this every year. Right down the stretch, he gets Auburn playing its best ball and playing at a level that you don't think they can play at. And I just think belief and morale means a lot right now. Auburn is getting enough pitching for the way it is hitting to where I think Auburn at 6 isn't too big of a reach. Again, now some other teams get healthy. Auburn would probably fall a couple of spots, but that's not how I'm doing this today. And that's why I've got Auburn at 6. I've got Tennessee at 5. And man, this is a confusing team because Tennessee at home is almost unbeatable. Tennessee on the road almost can't beat anybody. And so when you balance that out, you kind of get a team that falls in the middle. But with Tennessee, I've said this for a while, and I know the pitching's not been great lately. I'll look at the arms. Dolander, Beam, Burns, Andrew Lindsay, Sewell, Kirby Connell. They've just got a lot of arms that have been around and pitched a long time and pitched pretty well. And I think if you redid the season, Tennessee would probably have a better record on the road. Maybe it wouldn't be 32-5 at home. But I think that between all that and the talent, and remember, Tennessee was the consensus 2 or 3 team preseason. So seeing Tennessee play at a high level isn't exactly a reach. But the road part really worries me. That might be a team that just was built for that park and not built for other parks. And so putting Tennessee a lot higher seems like a little bit of a reach. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But you got some teams in front of them that are awfully talented too. And I think this would be the surprise of my countdown is having Alabama at 4. Again, I've been high on that team all year. And Alabama's had some pitching injuries. But you see what Alabama is getting now as guys are getting healthier. It's got a veteran lineup. It doesn't make a ton of mistakes in the field, at least when I watch Alabama. It is now rid of Brad Bohannon and playing better without him. Alabama at 4 is the one that I've got some reservations about. But again, I just look at this team. It's been solid. I think it's played okay on the road. I could be wrong about that. But this is just a team that if you look at the computers nationally, you might be surprised at how often Alabama pops up in the top 10 or top 12. And sometimes the computers maybe detect things that the rest of us aren't picking up on. Alabama at 4 might be a little bit high, but again, the point I'm trying to make here, this is a team that now the way it's assembled, it may not be the flashiest or most exciting team, but I don't see a lot of big holes compared to looking around at the rest of the league. And so that's why I've got Alabama at 4, just based on that balance and based on Alabama starting to play well and win some games. Remember, it just won a series at Texas A&M last weekend, beat Vanderbilt at home, winning both those series 2 out of 3 the last 2 weekends. Again, those are the first 2 weekends Alabama has played without Brad Bohannon, who, again, as I've said, may or may not have had his team's best interest in mind in the way that he managed it. And so I think that's something you've got to consider too. Number 3, I've got LSU. And you boy, the way LSU has pitched recently, you could even argue to put LSU lower, but the way LSU hits is another thing. I think that's a lineup that travels any park, anywhere. And I also think that if you kind of reassembled and played it again, and look, LSU has had some injuries too. Grant Taylor has been one. Garrett Edwards has been another one. If LSU has those guys, this is probably the number 1 team in the conference. And I don't even know if there's much debate on it if LSU has both those guys healthy. But it doesn't. And as the pitching injuries have piled up, The performance has taken a hit. You saw LSU get beat in its own park by Mississippi State last week. And I think what's really concerning to me is in game 3 situations lately, and really in game 2, is really once LSU gets past Paul Skeens, it just cannot trust anybody to get anybody out. Through 9 guys on Sunday against Mississippi State, none of them pitched well. Now, again, I think if you started over, the odds are that somebody pitches well are pretty high, just because I think LSU's got more talent than it has shown. You would think that Christian Little would pitch better. You would think that Thatcher Hurd would pitch better. That's another one that's just a head scratcher. One week he looks great. The next week he can't get anybody out. Ty Floyd, another guy in that Saturday spot. Some weeks it goes really well. I remember he went the distance or close to it against Ole Miss maybe about a month ago. Lately, he's not been very good. So I think if you were LSU and you played the season over again, even with the pitching staff it's got now, without key arms, the pitching would almost have to get better, almost just by default, by accident. But it hasn't, and I think there's enough concern with that to where there's a couple other teams I like better than LSU under this scenario. One would be Florida. Now, I have been kind of low man on Florida all year because of the walks, because of the pitching. Jack Caglione is lucky to make it into the 5th inning of most of his starts. Hurston Waldrop has been really wild. Brandon Sproat has been hit and miss. Great one week, awful the next. The bullpen has been a disaster a lot of the year. You're now seeing Florida pitch a lot better. And granted, it was Vanderbilt last weekend, and Vanderbilt's not hitting. But you saw Brandon Sproat throw a shutout in a run rule game on Friday night. You saw Waldrop get knocked out of his start because of rain, and the bullpen picked him up and pitched really well. And so the bullpen was able to get Florida through that series without Waldrop, who's a key part of things and can probably pitch better than he's pitched. And then Caglione goes and pitches like an ace. In that Sunday game, I think strikes out 9 and walks 1. Florida's awfully talented. I've heard some people say Florida might be the most talented team in the country. And so maybe this is just a case of a team that is sort of underachieved all season and is getting it together just in time for the postseason. I'm going to lean on that right now. I'm going to lean on the talent and the recency bias and the fact that Florida's rotation showed potential to be a lot better than it's been all year. You started to see that show up last weekend. That's why I've got the Gators at 2. I've got Arkansas at 1. Arkansas is going to get healthier. It's starting to get healthier. You're starting to see the results of that. This is a team that has just been able to piece it together. I don't know. I remember a couple years ago when people thought Arkansas was kind of unbeatable with Kevin Kopps. And for good reason. Arkansas won every weekend series. But if you inspect it a little bit further, you could see that they were leaning on Kopps to get them through game 1 or 2 or game 1 and 3 and throw a lot of pitches. And they were leaning on him and getting just enough to get through, but you thought the dam could burst on this at any time. I look at this Arkansas team, and it's a lot the opposite. You were seeing guys like Hagen Smith that are going longer as the season goes on. Arkansas got a complete game, I think, on Sunday or close to it from another starter. The name escapes me as I'm doing this. Arkansas fans, don't kill me. I've just blanked out on this one. But point I'm making here, you got Gage Wood, you got Tigert, you got guys like that are either getting better or coming back. And I look heavily at, okay, how do you get through 27 innings in a weekend series? And right now, Arkansas's got enough arms to cover it. And not just to cover it, but to cover it without having to white knuckle it. And that's something that a lot of teams don't have right now. And you're seeing guys in the lineup get healthier. If you got Peyton Stovall in that lineup or Josenberger or some of the guys that had missed some time here and there, that's already a pretty good to decent lineup. It becomes really good when you get all hands on deck. So I like the way that Arkansas has kind of figured out the pitching. I may trust the Razorbacks to consistently cover as many innings as anybody in a 27-inning scenario. The lineup has been good enough, even without some key guys, to where now that those guys are coming back, you would think that would make Arkansas stronger. That's what I lean on here as I put Arkansas at #1 in my power rankings, again, under the scenario that I created for myself here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. You may not have agreed with it. I doubt anybody's going to agree with where I've got everybody, but I hope that you found the insight helpful at least. If you enjoyed it and you don't subscribe, please do. That helps us. Hit the like button too. That helps our analytics. That helps us get noticed. And again, we try to do things a little differently and more in depth here at Southeastern 14. We don't do hot takes. We just try to put some analysis and thought into it and maybe bring you some angles that nobody else thought of. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, presented by Bearded Iris. We'll see you again soon with more SEC baseball content.